The diner hummed with the clatter of forks and the low murmur of voices, but all sound seemed to collapse into silence when Lieutenant Colonel Evelyn Carter stepped through the door. Her boots, polished to a mirror sheen, clicked against the linoleum floor. Her Air Force dress blues hung crisp, the silver oak leaves on her shoulders catching the fluorescent light. She carried no tray, no apron, no name tag. She was not here to serve. Yet every eye in the room turned to her, and the weight of their stares pressed like a physical force. At the counter, a man in a cheap suit, Greg Harlan, mid-40s, a regional manager for a failing car dealership, leaned back, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. His eyes narrowed, not with recognition but with judgment. "Well, damn," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Did the Pentagon send a model to pick up our order?" His table erupted in laughter, the kind that spills out too fast, too cruel, like oil from a cracked engine. Evelyn did not flinch. Her face, angular and unyielding, betrayed nothing. Scars traced her jawline, faint but unmistakable, like cracks in a marble statue. They disappeared beneath her collar, a map of pain no one in this greasy spoon would ever read. She stood at the counter, her posture parade ground perfect, and ordered a black coffee. Her voice was low, deliberate, each word a stone dropped into still water. The teenage cashier fumbled the cup, her cheeks flushing under Evelyn's steady gaze. The air smelled of burnt toast and diesel fumes from the trucks idling outside. The Nebraska wind howled, rattling the diner's loose window panes as if trying to claw its way inside. Evelyn's hands, gloved in white cotton to hide the worst of her burns, rested lightly on the counter. She felt the room's attention shift, the laughter dying into whispers. They saw her uniform, her scars, her silence. They saw a puzzle they could not solve, and it made them restless. Greg Harlan leaned forward, his chair creaking. "Hey, sweetheart," he called, his voice thick with mock charm. "What's with the costume? You heading to a Veterans Day parade or just lost a bet?" His cronies, salesmen mostly, with ties loosened and egos inflated, chuckled again, but it was thinner now, less certain. Evelyn turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. Her gaze was not angry, not wounded. It was the look of a predator sizing up prey too stupid to run. She said nothing. Silence was her weapon, honed over years of briefings and battlefields. She had faced worse than this. Mortar fire, screaming wounded, the slow burn of bureaucracy that tried to erase her. Greg Harlan was a mosquito, buzzing for attention, but mosquitoes could still draw blood. The cashier slid the coffee across the counter. Evelyn nodded, her gloved fingers curling around the mug. The heat seeped through the fabric, a faint echo of the fire that had marked her. She took a sip, her movements precise, as if pouring jet fuel into a fighter plane. The diner's hum resumed, but it was different now, strained like a radio tuned to static. Across the room, a man watched her. Tom Brennan, late 50s, sat alone in a corner booth. His flannel shirt and weathered hands marked him as a farmer, but his eyes carried the weight of something else, something military, something long buried. He noticed the way Evelyn stood, the way her shoulders squared against the room's hostility. It reminded him of Kandahar, of soldiers who moved like they expected the ground to explode. He saw her scars, too, and the way she wore them, not as shame, but as evidence. Greg Harlan wasn't done. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping like a challenge. "Come on now," he said, standing, his belly straining against his belt. "You're gonna wear that uniform and not tell us what's up? Those scars, car accident, kitchen fire?" He grinned, expecting a reaction, a crack in her armor. "Or did you just piss off the wrong guy?" The room froze. A waitress dropped a spoon, the clatter deafening in the sudden hush. Evelyn set her coffee down, the mug clicking softly against the counter. She turned to face Greg, her movements slow, deliberate. Her gloved hands hung loose at her sides, but Tom Brennan saw the subtle shift in her stance, knees slightly bent, weight balanced. She was ready for a fight, not with fists, but with something sharper. "Careful," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like a rifle shot. "Some stories cost more to hear than you're willing to pay." Greg blinked, his grin faltering. The room waited, breath held, for his comeback. But something in Evelyn's eyes, cold, unyielding, like the glint of a blade, made him hesitate. He laughed, too loud, and waved a hand. "Whatever, lady. Keep your secrets." "Probably nothing worth hearing anyway." Evelyn's lips twitched. Not a smile, but something close. She turned back to her coffee, dismissing him. The diner exhaled, conversations stuttering back to life. But Tom Brennan leaned forward, his hands tightening around his own mug. He saw what Greg didn't. The way Evelyn's gloved fingers flexed, the way her scars seemed to pulse with a story no one here deserved to know. She was not just a woman in a uniform. She was a storm, contained but brewing. And Tom, who had spent 20 years in the Army, recognized the insignia on her sleeve, a rare unit patch, one tied to covert ops, to missions whispered about in Pentagon backrooms. His heart thudded. Whoever she was no parade soldier. She was the real thing, and these fools had no idea. Greg sat down, muttering to his table, but his bravado was cracked. He shot glances at Evelyn as if expecting her to crumble. She didn't. She sipped her coffee, her eyes scanning the room, cataloging every face, every gesture. She was not here by accident. Tom felt it in his gut, the way he'd felt danger in the desert. She was hunting something, or someone. The door chime jangled. A man in a tailored suit stepped inside, his polished shoes out of place against the diner's grime. He carried a briefcase, his face sharp and unreadable. He scanned the room, his gaze locking onto Evelyn. She didn't move, didn't turn, but Tom saw her shoulders tense, just for a fraction of a second. The man approached the counter, his steps measured, and leaned in to speak to the cashier. His voice was too low to hear, but the cashier pointed at Evelyn. The man straightened, his eyes narrowing. He walked toward her, each step deliberate, like a chess player advancing a knight. Evelyn set her mug down, her gloved hands still. The diner's noise faded again, the air thick with unspoken stakes. Tom's pulse quickened. He didn't know her story, but he knew this moment, when silence becomes a weapon, when the world shifts on the edge of a blade. "Colonel Carter," the man said, his voice smooth but edged. "We need to talk." Evelyn turned, her scars catching the light. Her eyes met his, and for the first time Tom saw a flicker of something. Anger, resolve, or maybe both. She stood, her chair scraping softly, and faced the man. The room held its breath, every eye on her, but she was no longer just a scarred woman in a uniform. She was something else, something dangerous, and the diner was about to learn what. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on Evelyn Carter's face as she faced the man in the suit. His name was Victor Lang, though she did not know it yet. His briefcase rested on the counter, its leather polished to a sheen that mocked the diner's chipped formica. His eyes, gray and unblinking, studied her scars with clinical precision, as if they were a map to her secrets. Evelyn stood motionless, her gloved hands loose at her sides, but her pulse thrummed like a jet engine spooling up. "Colonel Carter," Lang repeated, his voice low, meant for her alone. "This is not a request." He tilted his head toward the door where the Nebraska wind howled, clawing at the glass. The diner's patrons watched, forks hovering, their curiosity a living thing that pressed against Evelyn's skin. She felt Tom Brennan's gaze from his corner booth, heavy with unspoken questions, but she did not look at him. Her focus was on Lang, on the faint bulge beneath his suit jacket, a holster, discreet but unmistakable. She nodded once, sharp, like a salute. "Outside," she said. Her voice was steady, but it carried the weight of command, the kind that had once silenced a room of generals. Lang's lips twitched, not quite a smile, and he gestured for her to lead. Evelyn moved, her boots clicking against the linoleum, each step measured. The diner exhaled as she passed, but the tension lingered, thick as the smell of grease and coffee. Outside, the wind bit at her face, tugging at her uniform. The parking lot was a sea of shadows, broken by the sodium glow of streetlights. Trucks idled nearby, their engines rumbling like distant thunder. Lang stopped beside a black sedan, its tinted windows reflecting Evelyn's silhouette, scarred, upright, unyielding. She faced him, her back to the diner, aware of every sound. The creak of a loose sign, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the faint clink of Lang's briefcase as he set it on the car's hood. "Talk," she said. Her breath clouded in the cold, but her eyes were clear, locked on his. She did not trust him. She had learned long ago that men in suits carried orders like knives, sharp, hidden, and meant to cut. Lang opened the briefcase, revealing a manila folder stamped with a red, classified seal. He slid it toward her, but Evelyn did not touch it. "Your presence here is a problem," he said. "You were supposed to stay gone." "Fort Riley, Leavenworth, anywhere but here." His voice was smooth, but there was steel beneath it, the kind that sliced careers in half. Evelyn's jaw tightened, her scars pulling taut. She remembered Fort Riley, endless debriefs, sterile rooms, the slow suffocation of being sidelined. She had walked away from it all, from the medals pinned to her chest, from the whispers of hero that felt like shackles. But the past was a hunter, and it had found her here, in a nowhere diner off a Nebraska highway. "Say what you came to say," she replied. Her gloved fingers flexed, itching for the weight of a rifle, for the clarity of a mission. Lang's eyes flicked to her hands, and she saw him recalculate, reassess. He was not military, she decided. Civilian, intelligence maybe, the kind who sent soldiers to die and never saw the blood. He tapped the folder. "Operation Nightshade, you remember it." It was not a question. Evelyn's stomach twisted, but her face remained stone. Nightshade. A name she had buried under years of silence, under the burns that marked her body like a ledger of sacrifice. She saw flashes, desert heat, the scream of incoming fire, the weight of a dying soldier in her arms. She blinked, and the images vanished, leaving only Lang's cold gaze. "I remember," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of graves. "What do you want?" Lang leaned closer, his breath smelling of mint and menace. "A name surfaced. Someone's talking, Colonel. About Nightshade, about you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We need to know who, and we need it quiet." Evelyn's mind raced, cataloging faces, voices, moments. Nightshade had been her crucible, the mission that had forged her and broken her. She had led her team through hell, saved lives, lost others. The scars on her body were proof of her survival, but the ones inside, guilt, rage, doubt, were heavier. She had left the Air Force to escape those ghosts, to become invisible. But invisibility was a lie. "Who's we?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Lang's smile was thin, predatory. He did not answer. Instead, he opened the folder, revealing a single photograph. A man, mid-30s, with a crooked nose and haunted eyes. Evelyn knew him instantly. Captain Daniel Reese, her second-in-command during Nightshade. The man who had carried her out of the fire, who had seen her at her weakest. The man she had not spoken to in years, He's in Omaha, Lang said, and he's not as discreet as you. He closed the folder, the snap of it loud in the cold. Find him. Silence him. Or we will. Evelyn's chest tightened, but she kept her face blank. Silence him. The words echoed, heavy with implication. She saw Reese's face in her mind, his crooked grin, his stubborn loyalty. He had been her brother in arms, her anchor in chaos. The idea of him betraying her, betraying Nightshade, was a blade to the gut, but so was the thought of what we might do to him. She stepped back, her boots crunching gravel. I'm not your errand girl, she said. Find someone else. Lang's smile vanished. You don't get to walk away, Colonel. Not from this. You know what's at stake. He leaned in, his voice a hiss. Nightshade stays buried. Or you do. The threat hung between them, sharp as a guillotine. Evelyn's scars burned under her gloves, a reminder of what she had already survived. She wanted to tell Lang to go to hell, to walk back into the diner and disappear into the life she had built. But she knew better. The military never let go. Not really. Inside the diner, Tom Brennan watched through the window, his coffee cold in his hands. He saw Evelyn's rigid posture, the way Lang's body language screamed control. He did not know her story, but he knew the look of a soldier cornered. His own past, 2 tours in Iraq, a Purple Heart he never wore, stirred, urging him to act, but he stayed still, his fingers tight around the mug, waiting. Evelyn met Lang's eyes, her own unyielding. 48 hours, she said. Then I'm done. It was not agreement, not surrender. It was a line in the sand, drawn with the precision of a sniper. Lang nodded, satisfied for now. He picked up the briefcase and walked to his sedan, the door slamming with finality. Evelyn stood alone in the parking lot, the wind tearing at her uniform. She felt the weight of Nightshade, of Reese, of the diner's staring eyes. She was not just a scarred veteran anymore. She was a weapon, recalled to service. She turned back to the diner, her boots steady despite the storm in her chest. The door loomed ahead, a threshold between the life she had chosen and the one she could not escape. She pushed it open, the chime ringing like a warning, and stepped back into the light. The diner's warmth hit Evelyn Carter like a slap, the smell of fried onions and stale coffee grounding her as she stepped back inside. Her Air Force dress blues felt heavier now, the silver oak leaves on her shoulders glinting under the fluorescent lights like accusations. The patron's eyes followed her, curious but cautious, their whispers a low hum beneath the clatter of plates. She moved to the counter, her boots deliberate against the linoleum, and reclaimed her coffee mug. It was cold, but she gripped it anyway, anchoring herself against the storm Victor Lang had unleashed. Tom Brennan watched from his corner booth, his farmer's hands still around his own mug. He saw the shift in Evelyn's posture, subtle but unmistakable. Her shoulders were squared, but there was a tension in her jaw, a flicker in her eyes that spoke of old wounds reopened. He knew that look. He had seen it in mirrors after Iraq, when nightmares wore his skin thin. He wanted to speak, to offer something, solidarity maybe, but the weight of her silence kept him rooted. Evelyn sipped the coffee, its bitterness sharp on her tongue. Her mind churned, replaying Lang's words. Find him. Silence him. Daniel Reese's face haunted her, his crooked nose, his quiet loyalty during Nightshade. She saw him in flashes, dragging her from the burning wreckage, his hands steady as hers bled. He had been her shadow, her shield. The idea of him talking, exposing their mission, clawed at her. Betrayal was a wound deeper than fire. She set the mug down, her gloved fingers flexing. The scars beneath the cotton itched, a phantom burn that never faded. She scanned the diner, cataloging faces out of habit. Greg Harlan and his cronies at their table, their laughter muted now, their eyes darting to her and away. The teenage cashier wiping the counter with nervous swipes. An old woman in a corner, her fork paused over a slice of pie, her gaze soft but piercing. Evelyn felt exposed, a target painted on her back. Lang's sedan was gone, but his threat lingered like smoke. The door chime jangled. A new customer stepped in. A woman, mid-30s, with a worn denim jacket and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hair was pulled back, her face weathered but alert. She scanned the room, her eyes locking onto Evelyn for a fraction too long before she slid into a booth near the window. Evelyn's instincts flared. The woman's posture, shoulders back, hands visible but ready, was military. Not active duty, but trained. Evelyn filed it away, her mind a steel trap for details. She turned back to the counter, her coffee untouched now. She needed to move, to act, but the diner felt like a cage. Omaha was 3 hours away. Reese a ghost she had to hunt. Lang's 48-hour clock ticked in her head, each second a pulse of pressure. She could walk away, disappear into the Nebraska plains, but Nightshade's secrets were her chains. She had buried them once. She would not let them bury her. Tom Brennan stood, his chair scraping softly. He approached the counter, his flannel shirt rumpled, his steps slow but deliberate. Evelyn sensed him before she saw him, her peripheral vision sharp as a hawk's. He stopped a respectful distance away, his hands in his pockets, his eyes steady but not intrusive. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, roughened by years of dust and duty. "I don't mean to pry, but that suit outside, he wasn't selling insurance." He paused, searching her face. "You need backup?" Evelyn's lips twitched, not a smile, but an acknowledgement. She saw the army in him, the way he stood, the weight of his question. He was offering more than words, and she respected it. But she shook her head, her voice quiet. "Appreciate it, but this is my fight." Tom nodded, unsurprised. He slid a napkin across the counter, a phone number scrawled in black ink. "Case you change your mind," he said. "Tom Brennan." First Cav, retired. He turned back to his booth, leaving her with the napkin and the weight of his trust. Evelyn pocketed the napkin, her gloved fingers brushing the fabric of her uniform. She was alone, but not unguarded. Her training was her armor, her silence, her blade. She paid for the coffee, leaving a crisp $5 bill, and stepped toward the door. The woman in the denim jacket watched her, her eyes narrowing slightly. Evelyn met her gaze, holding it for a beat, long enough to say, "I see you," before pushing through the door. The night air was sharp, the wind carrying the tang of diesel and frost. Evelyn's rental car, a nondescript gray sedan, waited in the lot. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather cold against her back. Her hands gripped the wheel, the gloves creaking. She needed a plan. Reese was in Omaha, but Lang's folder had no address, no details. She would have to track him, and she would have to do it fast. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, the screen's glow harsh in the dark. A text from an unknown number. "He's at the old market. Blue Door Pub." Be careful. No signature, no context. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Lang? Someone else? She stared at the words, her mind dissecting possibilities. A trap was likely, but so was Reese. She typed a reply, "Who is this?" but deleted it. No time for games. She started the engine, the rumble steadying her. The road to Omaha stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt under a sky bruised with clouds. She drove, the diner shrinking in her rearview mirror, its lights a fading beacon. Her thoughts churned. Reese, Nightshade, the woman in the denim jacket, pieces of a puzzle she did not yet understand. Half an hour into the drive, her headlights caught a figure on the roadside. A hitchhiker, thumb out, face shadowed by a hood. Evelyn slowed, her instincts prickling. The figure turned and she saw the denim jacket, the backpack. The woman from the diner. Evelyn's grip tightened on the wheel. Coincidence was a lie in her world. She pulled over, gravel crunching under the tires. The woman approached, her movements fluid but cautious. Evelyn lowered the window, her right hand resting near the knife strapped beneath the seat. "You following me?" she asked, her voice flat. The woman's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Maybe you're following me." Her voice was low, tinged with a southern drawl. She leaned closer, her eyes glinting in the dashboard light. "Name's Riley. I know you're headed to Omaha. I know why." Evelyn's scars burned under her gloves. She studied Riley, her steady gaze, her calloused hands, the faint scar above her eyebrow. Another veteran, she guessed. Special Forces, maybe. "Talk," Evelyn said, echoing her earlier demand of Lang. Riley's smile faded. "Reese isn't the problem. He's the bait." She paused, glancing down the empty highway. "Someone's cleaning house, Colonel. Nightshade's loose ends." "You're one of them." The words hit like a gut punch. Evelyn's mind raced, connecting dots. Lang's urgency, the classified folder, the text. She saw Nightshade's ghosts rising, her team, her failures, her promises. Riley's eyes held no lie, but trust was a luxury Evelyn could not afford. "Get in," Evelyn said, her voice steel. Riley hesitated, then slung her backpack into the back seat and climbed in. The car smelled of leather and tension. Evelyn pulled onto the highway, the speedometer climbing. Omaha loomed, a city of answers and traps. The road hummed beneath them, the night swallowing their silence. Evelyn's scars ached, her past a weight she could not outrun. Reese was close, but so was danger. And Riley, this stranger with too much knowledge, was either an ally or a blade in the dark. The Blue Door Pub waited, and with it, the truth or the end. The highway stretched before Evelyn Carter's sedan, a black ribbon slicing through Nebraska's endless plains. The dashboard clock glowed 11:17 p.m., each tick a reminder of Victor Lang's 48-hour ultimatum. Evelyn's gloved hands gripped the wheel, her scars itching beneath the cotton as the engine's hum filled the silence. Beside her, Riley sat with her backpack between her knees, her denim jacket creased from the road. Her eyes scanned the darkness beyond the headlights, alert, like a soldier waiting for an ambush. Evelyn's mind churned. Riley's words. Reese isn't the problem. He's the bait, hung heavy, a warning she could not ignore. Nightshade's ghosts loomed larger now, their shadows cast by secrets she had buried in the desert. Daniel Reese, her brother-in-arms, was in Omaha, and someone wanted him silenced. Maybe her too. She glanced at Riley, whose face was half lit by the dashboard's glow, her scar above the eyebrow a faint silver line. Ally or threat? Evelyn could not decide. Not yet. "Talk," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the hum of tires on asphalt. "You know too much." "Who are you? And why are you here?" Riley's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk. "Straight to the point. I like that." She shifted, her hands resting lightly on her backpack, fingers loose but ready. "Riley Morgan, former Green Beret 5th Special Forces Group, discharged 3 years ago. I've been tracking Nightshade's fallout since." Her southern drawl was steady, but her eyes flicked to Evelyn, searching for a reaction. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Special Forces. It explained Riley's posture, her instincts, but trust was a minefield. "Tracking how?" she asked. "And why me?" Riley exhaled, her breath fogging briefly in the cool car. "Nightshade wasn't just a mission, Colonel. It was a cover. You know that. Things went wrong, people died, secrets got buried, but someone's digging now." Reese is talking, or someone thinks he is, and you're the one they're sending to clean it up. She paused, her voice lowering. I'm here because I owe Reese. And because I don't trust the suits calling the shots. Evelyn's scars burned, memories of fire and blood clawing at her. Nightshade had been her command, a covert op in a war zone, a mission to extract a high-value target. It had gone sideways, an ambush, a betrayal, a fire that consumed her team. She had pulled Reese from the wreckage, but not everyone made it out. The official report called it a success. She called it a lie. Who's they? Evelyn asked, her eyes fixed on the road. A sign flashed by, Omaha 42 miles. The Blue Door pub was close, and with it, Reese, or a trap. Riley hesitated, her fingers tightening on her backpack. Not sure, could be CIA, DIA, or some off-the-books outfit. Lang's type, suits with no names, no accountability. They're tying up loose ends. Reese is one. You're another. Evelyn's chest tightened, but her face remained stone. She saw Lang's cold eyes, his classified folder, his threat. Nightshade stays buried. Or you do. Riley's story fit, but it raised more questions. If Reese was bait, who was the hunter? And why now, years after the mission? She needed answers, and Reese was her only lead. The car's headlights caught a deer on the roadside, its eyes glowing before it bolted into the dark. Evelyn's pulse steadied, her training kicking in. You said you owe Reese. How? She asked. Riley's gaze drifted to the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. He saved my ass in Syria, 2 years before Nightshade. Pulled me out of a firefight when my team got pinned. I'd be dead without him. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of debt. He's a good man, Colonel. If he's talking, it's because he's desperate, or someone's squeezing him. Evelyn nodded, filing the information away. Reese had always been loyal, steady under pressure. The thought of him breaking under coercion twisted her gut. She saw him in her mind, his crooked grin, his hands steadying her as flames roared. She owed him too, more than she could repay. The skyline of Omaha appeared, a smudge of lights against the horizon. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, keeping one hand on the wheel. Another text from the unknown number, Blue Door. Back room. He's there now. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she did not reply. Trap or not, she was out of time. Trouble? Riley asked, her eyes on the phone. Maybe, Evelyn said. She slid the phone back into her pocket, her mind racing. The text could be Lang, Riley, or someone else entirely. She glanced at her passenger, whose hands were still, her face unreadable. You armed? Riley's smirk returned. Always. She patted her backpack, the faint clink of metal confirming it. You? Evelyn's knife, strapped beneath the seat, was her only weapon. Her service pistol was long gone, locked away with her past. Enough, she said. Riley nodded, a silent agreement. Whatever waited at the Blue Door, they would face it together. For now. The city closed around them, its streets narrow and shadowed. The Blue Door pub was in the old market, a brick-fronted dive bar nestled among cobblestone alleys. Evelyn parked a block away, the sedan blending into the row of cars. The air was colder here, the wind carrying the tang of river mud and spilled beer. She stepped out, her boots silent on the pavement, and Riley followed, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The pub's neon sign flickered, casting blue light across the sidewalk. Laughter and music spilled from the open door, but Evelyn's focus was on the alley beside it, where a rusted fire escape led to a back entrance. The text had said back room. She gestured to Riley, who nodded and moved to flank her. They slipped into the alley, the shadows swallowing them. The back door was steel, dented but solid. Evelyn tested the handle, unlocked. Her scars prickled, her instincts screaming. She drew her knife, the blade a reassuring weight, and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, revealing a dim hallway lit by a single bulb. The air smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke, the faint thump of the bar's jukebox vibrating through the walls. Riley drew a compact pistol from her backpack, her movements fluid. Evelyn raised an eyebrow but said nothing. They moved forward, Evelyn in the lead, her knife low and ready. The hallway ended at a wooden door, light seeping through the crack beneath. Voices murmured inside. 2, maybe 3. One was familiar, rough and tired. Reese. Evelyn's heart thudded, but her hand was steady. She glanced at Riley, who nodded, her pistol raised. Evelyn pushed the door open, stepping into a small room lit by a flickering lamp. Reese sat at a table, his face haggard, a half-empty whiskey glass in front of him. 2 men stood nearby, civilians, but their postures screamed hired muscle. They turned, hands reaching for concealed weapons. "Easy," Evelyn said, her voice calm but lethal. Her knife gleamed, her stance ready. Reese's eyes widened, a mix of relief and fear. "Colonel," he rasped, his voice cracked from drink or despair. One of the men smirked, his hand on a holster. "You're late," he said. "Boss said you'd show." Evelyn's scars burned, her mind snapping to Lang, to Riley's warning. Bait. The room felt smaller, the air thick with imminent violence. Riley stepped beside her, pistol steady, her eyes locked on the second man. Reese pushed back his chair, unsteady but rising. The lamp flickered, shadows dancing across the walls. "Boss wants a word," the first man said, drawing his gun. "Drop the knife, Colonel, or your friend here doesn't walk out." Evelyn's gaze flicked to Reese, then to Riley, then to the men. Her knife stayed in her hand, her scars a reminder of what she had survived. Nightshade was here, in this room, and she would not let it claim her again. She stepped forward, her voice low, unyielding. "Tell your boss he's about to make a mistake." The room erupted. The back room of the Blue Door pub exploded into chaos. Evelyn Carter's knife flashed as she lunged, her gloved hand deflecting the first man's gun arm. The weapon skidded across the floor, clattering against the wall. Riley Morgan fired, her pistol's report deafening in the cramped space. The second man grunted, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers as he stumbled back. Daniel Reese dove for cover behind the table, his whiskey glass shattering on the floor. The air reeked of gunpowder and fear, the flickering lamp casting jagged shadows across the fray. Evelyn's scars burned beneath her gloves, her body moving on instinct honed by years of combat. She drove her shoulder into the first man, slamming him against the wall. His breath wheezed out, but he swung a fist, catching her jaw. Pain sparked, sharp but fleeting. She twisted his arm, her knife at his throat, the blade's edge kissing skin. "Stay down," she hissed, her voice a low growl. He froze, eyes wide, arrogance replaced by terror. Riley kept her pistol trained on the second man, who clutched his wounded shoulder, cursing through gritted teeth. "Don't move," she said, her southern drawl steady, her stance unyielding. The room fell silent, save for the muffled jukebox thumping through the walls and Reese's ragged breathing. Evelyn's gaze flicked to him, sprawled behind the overturned table, his face pale but alive. His eyes met hers, haunted, pleading, but not broken. "Colonel," Reese rasped, struggling to his feet. His hands shook, but his voice held a flicker of the man she remembered. "I didn't talk. I swear." Evelyn's knife stayed at the first man's throat, her other hand pinning his wrist. She studied Reese, searching for lies in the lines of his face, his crooked nose, his bloodshot eyes, the stubble shadowing his jaw. They told a story of a man unraveling, but not a traitor. Not yet. "Then why are you here?" she asked, her tone cold, cutting through the room's tension like a wire. Reese swallowed, glancing at the two men. They found me. Said they had orders, said you were coming. His voice cracked, and he ran a hand through his hair, fingers trembling. Nightshade. They know too much. Evelyn's scars throbbed, memories of fire and betrayal clawing at her. Nightshade was a wound that refused to heal, and these men, hired muscle, not soldiers, were proof it was bleeding again. She pressed the knife harder, drawing a bead of blood from the first man's neck. "Who's your boss?" she demanded. "Lang? Someone else?" The man sneered, defiance flickering despite the blade. "You're dead already, lady. You just don't know it." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but before she could press, the door burst open. A third man stepped in, his suit crisp, his face shadowed by a fedora. His presence sucked the air from the room, his calm a stark contrast to the blood and chaos. "Enough," he said, his voice smooth, authoritative. He carried no weapon, but his hands were steady, his posture radiating control. Evelyn recognized the type. A handler, a puppet master. Like Victor Lang, but older, sharper. Riley's pistol swung toward him, but he raised a hand, unperturbed. "Colonel Carter, lower the knife. We're not enemies, not yet." Evelyn's grip tightened, her mind racing. Reese's fear, Riley's warning, the texts, they all pointed to a web tightening around her. She eased the knife back, just enough to let the man breathe, but kept him pinned. "Name," she said. "Now." The man in the fedora smiled faintly, his eyes glinting like polished steel. "Call me Shepard. I represent interested parties." He glanced at Reese, then back to Evelyn. "You're here for answers. I have them, but not in this room." Riley snorted, her pistol still raised. "Nice hat, Shepard. But you're not calling the shots." Her finger hovered over the trigger, her scar above the eyebrow stark in the lamplight. Shepard's smile didn't waver, but his eyes flicked to her, assessing, calculating. Evelyn's pulse steadied, her training locking in. She released the first man, shoving him to the floor, and sheathed her knife. Her gloves creaked as she flexed her hands, her scars a silent reminder of what she had survived. "Talk," she said, echoing her demands from the diner, from the highway. "Why Reese? Why Nightshade?" Shepard stepped forward, ignoring the bloodied men and the overturned table. He produced a slim folder from his coat, unmarked but heavy with implication. "Nightshade was never closed, Colonel. You thought it was—" "You were wrong." He set the folder on the table, its edge stained with whiskey. "Someone's selling its secrets, not Reese. But he knows who." Reese flinched, his hands clenching. "I told you I didn't talk!" His voice rose, desperate, but Evelyn saw the guilt in his eyes, the weight of something unsaid. She stepped toward him, her boots crunching glass, her presence commanding silence. "Daniel," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "What did you do?" Reese's shoulders sagged, his gaze dropping to the floor. I kept records. After Nightshade. Names, dates, orders, insurance, I thought. He swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. "Someone stole them, a month ago. I've been running since." Evelyn's chest tightened, her scars pulsing with the heat of betrayal. Records, Nightshade's truth, her truth, exposed. She saw the mission again, the ambush, the fire, the screams. She had carried those secrets in silence, let them burn her. Reese had written them down, and now they were a weapon in someone else's hands. Shepard watched her, his expression unreadable. "The buyer's meeting in Omaha tomorrow night," he said. "A warehouse on the riverfront. You want the truth, Colonel? Find those records. Stop the sale." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "Or Nightshade buries you all." Riley lowered her pistol, her gaze shifting to Evelyn. "He's playing us," she muttered. "But he's not lying." Her Green Beret instincts were sharp, and Evelyn trusted them, if not Shepard. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of choices. Evelyn picked up the folder, its paper cool against her gloves. She flipped it open, a single page, typed, detailing a location and time. No names, no proof. A lead or a trap. She closed it, her mind cataloging options. Reese was a liability, but he was hers. Riley was a wild card, but she was steady. Shepard was a shadow, but he had answers. "Get up," she told Reese, her voice steel. He rose, unsteady, his eyes pleading for trust she could not give. She turned to Shepard. "If this is a setup, I'll find you." Her words were not a threat, but a promise, carved from the same resolve that had pulled her from fire. Shepard nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "I expect nothing less." He stepped back, gesturing to his men. They limped out, the wounded one clutching his shoulder, the other glaring at Evelyn. Shepard followed, his fedora a dark silhouette against the hallway's dim light. Evelyn turned to Riley and Reese, the folder heavy in her hand. The jukebox's muffled beat pulsed through the walls, a reminder of the world beyond this room. Omaha's riverfront waited, a battlefield of secrets and lies. Nightshade was alive, and it was coming for her. She met Riley's gaze, then Reese's, her scars a map of what she had lost, and what she would fight to protect. "We move now," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "No one runs, no one hides." She stepped toward the door, the folder tucked under her arm, her boots steady despite the storm in her chest. The truth was close, but so was the fire. The Omaha riverfront loomed under a sky heavy with clouds, the Missouri's sluggish current reflecting the city's sodium lights. Evelyn Carter's sedan idled in a shadowed alley, the engine's low rumble blending with the distant hum of traffic. Her gloved hands rested on the wheel, her scars prickling beneath the cotton as she scanned the warehouse across the street. Its brick facade was crumbling, windows boarded, but a faint glow seeped through the cracks, a signal of life inside. The folder from Shepard lay on the passenger seat, its single page memorized. Pier 17 Warehouse, 1 o'clock a.m. The clock read 12:47. Riley Morgan sat beside her, her pistol cleaned and reloaded, her backpack at her feet. Her denim jacket was zipped tight, her scar above the eyebrow stark in the dashboard's glow. Daniel Reese hunched in the back, his hands clasped, his breathing uneven. His crooked nose cast a jagged shadow, his eyes darting to Evelyn's silhouette. She felt his guilt, his fear, like a weight in the air. Nightshade's records, his records, were inside that warehouse, or so Shepard claimed. Evelyn trusted none of it, but she had no choice. The truth was a blade, and she would wield it or bleed. "Plan?" Riley asked, her southern drawl clipped, her fingers tapping the pistol's grip. Her Green Beret calm was a mirror to Evelyn's own, but her eyes held questions she did not voice. Evelyn's gaze stayed on the warehouse. "We go in quiet. Find the records, find the buyer. No bloodshed unless they force it." Her voice was steel, her Air Force training a scaffold for the chaos in her chest. She turned to Reese. "You're with me. You know those records better than anyone. Point them out, and you might still walk away." Reese nodded, his jaw tight. "I didn't mean for this, Colonel. I needed to remember." His voice cracked, a soldier broken by his own ghosts. Evelyn's scars ached, but she offered no comfort. She had carried Nightshade's weight alone. He had chosen to write it down. She opened the car door, the cold air sharp with the river's tang. Her boots hit the pavement, silent, deliberate. Riley followed, her pistol low, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Reese stumbled out, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes scanning the shadows. The alley smelled of damp brick and diesel, the wind carrying the faint clink of chains from the docks. They crossed the street, sticking to the shadows. The warehouse's side door was rusted, half hidden by overgrown weeds. Evelyn tested the handle. Locked. Riley knelt, producing a lockpick from her backpack. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, the lock clicking open in seconds. Evelyn nodded, a silent acknowledgement of skill. They slipped inside, the door creaking shut behind them. The interior was a cavern of darkness, broken by pools of light from hanging bulbs. Crates loomed like sentinels, their surfaces dusted with grime. The air was thick with the scent of oil and mold, the faint drip of water echoing somewhere deep. Evelyn's knife was in her hand, its weight familiar, her scars pulsing with memory. She gestured for Riley to flank right, Reese to stay close. They moved, ghosts in a tomb. Voices drifted from the far end, low and clipped. Evelyn crouched behind a crate, her eyes adjusting to the dimness. A table stood under a bulb, surrounded by 4 figures. One was Victor Lang, his suit pristine, his briefcase open. Another was a woman, mid-40s, her hair pulled back, her posture rigid. Military, Evelyn guessed, or ex-agency. The other 2 were muscle, their hands on holsters, their eyes scanning the room. A laptop glowed on the table, beside a stack of files. Nightshade's records, Evelyn knew, her gut twisting. Reese's breath hitched beside her. "That's them," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "My notes. Everything." His hands trembled, but he pointed to the files, his eyes pleading for redemption. Evelyn's mind raced, cataloging threats. Lang was the key, his presence confirmed Shepard's story, but his role was unclear. The woman was a wild card, her calm too deliberate. The muscle were predictable, but dangerous. Riley caught her eye from across the room, her pistol ready, her nod a question. Now. Evelyn shook her head, signaling patience. She needed to hear the deal, to know who wanted Nightshade's secrets. She crept closer, Reese at her heels, her boots silent on the concrete. The voices sharpened. "Payments cleared?" the woman said, her tone brisk. "Half now, half after delivery." "You guaranteed these are complete." Lang's smile was thin, predatory. "Every detail of Nightshade. Names, dates, locations." "The Pentagon buried it, but you'll have the truth." He tapped the files, his fingers lingering. "Enough to burn careers. Or start wars." The woman's eyes narrowed. "And Carter? You said she'd be handled." Evelyn's scars burned, her grip tightening on the knife. Lang's laugh was soft, chilling. "She's here, isn't she? Right on schedule." He glanced into the shadows as if he could see her. "She'll do what she's told. Or she'll be buried with the rest." Reese's hand clutched Evelyn's arm, his fear palpable. She shook him off, her eyes locked on Lang. He had played her, used her to flush out the records, to draw her into his web. Riley's warning echoed. "You're one of the loose ends." Evelyn's pulse steadied, her training a lifeline. She would not be buried. She signaled Riley, 2 fingers, a sharp nod. Riley moved, silent as a specter, circling behind the muscle. Evelyn stood, her knife gleaming, and stepped into the light. "Lang," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a shot. "You're out of moves." The muscle drew their guns, but Riley was faster, her pistol barking. One man dropped, clutching his knee, his weapon skidding away. The other froze, Riley's barrel at his temple. The woman spun, her hand reaching for a concealed weapon, but Evelyn's knife was at her throat in an instant, the blade steady. Lang clapped, slow and deliberate, his smile unshaken. "Colonel Carter," predictable but impressive. He closed the briefcase, his movements casual. "You want the records?" "Take them, but you won't leave this room." Evelyn's scars pulsed, her eyes burning into his. "Who's buying?" she demanded, her knife pressing harder. The woman tensed, but stayed still, her breath shallow. Lang's smile widened. Someone with more power than you can imagine. Nightshade's just the start. He stepped back, his hands raised, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. Kill me and you'll never know. Reese lunged for the files, desperate, but the woman kicked the table, sending the laptop crashing. Sparks flew, the screen flickering out. Evelyn's knife stayed steady, but her mind screamed, "Trap!" Lang was stalling, waiting for something, or someone. A low hum grew, vibrating through the floor. Headlights pierced the warehouse windows, engines roaring outside, reinforcements. Evelyn's heart thudded, but her face was stone. She shoved the woman away, grabbing the files. "Riley! Reese! Move!" she barked, her voice a whip. Riley fired a warning shot, keeping the muscle pinned. Reese scrambled, clutching the files, his eyes wild. They ran for the side door, Lang's laughter chasing them. "You can't outrun this, Colonel!" he called, his voice echoing as the warehouse shook with the sound of vehicles. They burst into the alley, the cold air a shock. 3 black SUVs blocked the street, their doors opening, figures emerging, armed, organized. Evelyn's knife was useless against automatic rifles, but her mind was a weapon, calculating escape. The river was close, its current a chance. "Down the dock!" she ordered, pushing Reese ahead. Riley covered their rear, her pistol steady. Bullets pinged off the brick, sparks flying. Evelyn's scars burned, her past and present colliding. Nightshade was alive, and it wanted blood. She ran, the files heavy in her hands, the truth a burden she could not drop. The Missouri River churned below the Omaha docks, its surface a black mirror under the clouded sky. Evelyn Carter's boots pounded the wooden planks, the Nightshade files clutched tight against her chest. Her scars burned beneath her gloves, each step a pulse of fire and memory. Riley Morgan ran beside her, pistol in hand, her breath steady despite the chaos. Daniel Reese stumbled behind, his face pale, the weight of his betrayal dragging at his heels. Gunfire cracked from the alley, the black SUV's headlights slicing through the dark as their pursuers closed in. Evelyn's mind was a battlefield, her Air Force training mapping the terrain. The dock ended 50 yards ahead, a rusted ladder descending to the water. A small motorboat bobbed below, half hidden by reeds. A smuggler's relic, maybe, but their only chance. Victor Lang's laughter still echoed in her ears, his words a taunt. "You can't outrun this, Colonel." She would prove him wrong or die trying. "Move!" she barked, her voice cutting through the wind's howl. Riley glanced back, firing 2 shots into the shadows. A grunt followed, one of the pursuers dropping, but more took his place. 6, maybe 8, their rifles glinting. Reese tripped, his hands scraping the dock, but Evelyn hauled him up, her grip iron. "No stopping," she said, her eyes locked on the ladder. His guilt would not slow them. The files were heavy, their pages a ledger of Nightshade's sins. Names, dates, orders, lives. Reese's records, stolen and sold, were a fuse lit years ago, and now the explosion was here. Evelyn saw the mission in flashes. The desert ambush, the fire, the screams of her team. She had buried it, but Lang and his interested parties had dug it up. She would not let them win. Riley reached the ladder first, slinging her backpack down and descending with Green Beret precision. "Boat's good," she called, her voice sharp over the river's rush. Evelyn pushed Reese forward, his hands fumbling for the rungs. Bullets splintered the dock, wood shards flying. She ducked, her knife useless against rifles, her scars screaming with every move. She slid down the ladder, landing in the boat's hull with a thud. Riley was at the motor, yanking the cord. The engine sputtered, then roared, coughing black smoke. Reese curled in the bow, clutching the files, his eyes wide with terror. Evelyn untied the mooring rope, her gloved fingers steady despite the gunfire. The boat lurched forward, the river's current pulling them into its embrace. Bullets plinked into the water, sprays erupting, but the darkness swallowed them, the SUV's lights fading. Evelyn crouched, her hand on the tiller, steering into the channel. The cold bit her face, the river's spray stinging her scars. Riley scanned the shore, pistol ready, her scar above the eyebrow a silver line in the moonlight. "They'll follow," she said, her drawl tight. "Lang's got resources." "Let them," Evelyn replied, her voice low, unyielding. She glanced at Reese, his hands trembling around the files. "Talk, Daniel." "Who stole the records? Who's the buyer?" Reese's breath hitched, his eyes darting to the water. "I don't know," he said, his voice breaking. "I kept them in a safe. Digital copies, paper backups. Someone broke in, took everything. I thought it was Lang, but—" He swallowed, his guilt a weight she could feel. The woman in the warehouse. She knew details, things only my team knew. Evelyn's scars pulsed, her mind snapping to the woman, rigid, military, unafraid of her knife. A traitor from within, maybe, or a ghost from Nightshade's past. She saw Lang's smile, Shepard's fedora, the web tightening. "You should have burned them," she said, her tone cold. "You put us all at risk." Reese's head dropped, his shoulders shaking. "I couldn't forget," he whispered. "You carried it in silence." "I needed proof it was real." Riley snorted, her pistol still raised. "Proof's gonna get us killed, Captain." But her eyes softened, a flicker of understanding. She owed Reese, Evelyn remembered, and that debt kept her here, in this boat, in this fight. The river widened, the city's lights a distant glow. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her pocket, the sound jarring. She pulled it out, the screen's light harsh. A new text, unknown number, Pier 22. Leave the files, walk away. Her thumb hovered, her pulse steady. Lang, Shepard, or someone new, she did not care. She powered the phone off, tossing it into the river. No more games. "Colonel," Riley said, her voice low. She nodded to the shore where a single headlight pierced the dark, tracking them. A patrol boat, sleek and fast, its engine a low growl. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Lang's resources, as Riley predicted. The files were a beacon, drawing every predator in the night. She pushed the throttle, the boat surging, waves slapping the hull. Reese clutched the files tighter, his knuckles white. "What now?" he asked, his voice small. "We end this," Evelyn said. Her scars were fire, her resolve steel. She steered for Pier 22, not to surrender but to confront. The truth was in those files, and she would wield it like a weapon. Nightshade had taken her team, her peace, her skin. It would not take her soul. The patrol boat closed, its spotlight blinding. A megaphone crackled. "Cut your engine, Colonel Carter. You have nowhere to go." Lang's voice, smooth and smug, carried over the water. Evelyn's lips twitched, not a smile but a challenge. She saw Riley's nod, Reese's fear, the file's weight. She was not alone, but she was the leader. She cut the engine, the boat drifting in the current. The patrol boat slowed, its crew visible, 4 men, armed, Lang at the helm. Evelyn stood, her boots steady on the rocking deck, the files in one hand, her knife in the other. "You want these?" she called, her voice carrying over the river. "Come take them." Lang laughed, but it was thin, strained. "You're out of moves, Colonel." "Hand them over, and you might live." Evelyn's scars burned, her past and present one. She saw Nightshade's fire, her team's faces, the lies that had buried them. She saw Reese's guilt, Riley's loyalty, her own strength. She stepped to the boat's edge, the files raised. "You forgot who I am," she said, her voice a blade. "I don't surrender." She dropped the files into the river, their pages scattering like ash. Reese gasped, Riley cursed, but Evelyn's eyes never left Lang. The patrol boat lurched forward, its crew scrambling, but the current was swift, the files gone. Lang's face twisted, his control shattered. Riley fired, her pistol sparking in the dark. The spotlight shattered, plunging the river into shadow. Evelyn gunned the engine, the boat roaring toward the shore. Bullets flew, but the night was theirs. They hit the bank, scrambling onto mud and gravel, the patrol boat stuck in the shallows. Evelyn led them into the trees, her scars alive with purpose. The files were gone, but she had memorized their truth. Nightshade was exposed, and she would finish it, her way, on her terms. Lang was behind, but not for long. She glanced at Riley, at Reese, their faces set with resolve. They were her team now, scarred and flawed, but hers. The river roared behind them, a witness to her defiance. Evelyn's boots crunched leaves, her knife gleaming, her scars a map of survival. The fight was not over, but she was ready. Nightshade would fall, and she would rise.